So how are you guys doing today? All good? Cool. So today we are here to sort of talk about like data provenance and privacy. But before we jump into it, I guess let's maybe introduce ourselves. I'm Roshan. I'm a researcher at Marlin, where we work on like verifiable off-chain compute and like co-processors. Amongst which we work on like verifiable model training, inference, running AI agents, all that stuff. So yeah, let's go around and just quickly introduce yourselves. Your project, how it relates to the AI space and all of that. Yeah.
I'll give a quick intro of my background. So before getting into crypto, I was previously a researcher at a national laboratory in the US where I focused on breaking cryptographic hardware. I then worked on a PhD, and I got a PhD in AI focused on reinforcement learning. And then after that, we started Semiotic labs, where the first year we focused on fully homomorphic encryption, mainly getting funding from the government. But we weren't able to find product market fit outside of government funding. And then we transitioned into crypto in 2021. And now we're a core dev team in the Graph protocol. And our team is responsible for cryptography and verifiability in the Graph and bringing AI capabilities to the Graph protocol.
Thanks. My name is Angel Versetti. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an investor. I've previously co-founded a company called Ambrosus that focused on data provenance for the supply chain. Prior to that, I used to work at the United Nations focusing on the emerging technologies, and the question of using data for making geopolitical decisions was quite a major one. And currently, I'm the CEO of PrivateAI. PrivateAI is a distributed machine learning protocol with focus on data, in particular privacy preservation of data and data traceability. As AI is becoming an everyday part of our life, what kind of data we're dealing with, how it was collected, how it was filtered, how it was processed, where it came from is going to be super important. And we're tackling a bunch of challenges trying to answer those questions.
Hey there, I'm Zach. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aztec. We are a privacy-preserving layer 2 for Ethereum, so recreating the smart contracts ecosystem that you see in Ethereum, but one we have private state as a first-class primitive, so you have strong composable privacy within distributed transactions.
Hey everyone, my name is Bidhan. I'm the founder of Bagel. In my previous life, I used to be the AI ML infra lead for Amazon Alexa. So led a team of developers who were responsible for the machine learning infrastructure of more than 100 million Alexa devices around the world. So one of the biggest machine learning systems that exist on this planet. Bagel is a research lab. We try to expand the capabilities of AI through cryptography. And privacy is a big part of that as well.
All right, perfect. So I guess let me just quickly set the stage for like what we're going to talk about, which is like provenance and privacy, right? So they're a little independent concepts. Provenance basically refers to how do you sort of verify and audit the data that actually goes into, let's say, something like training a model, right? And like in the world of like AI agents today, I would probably extend that to include the data that the agents are using to, let's say, make decisions and like execute actions as well, right? And privacy basically refers to like how private the data that's going to training is. So let's maybe tackle all of these like one by one. Let's start with provenance, right? So provenance is not just an issue in Web3, it's quite a big issue in like Web2 as well. So how do you think like Web3 and maybe like your projects in general like can sort of help us like audit and verify where like data is actually coming from?
So yeah, let's break it down. So data provenance, what do we mean? Like, what is it meant by that? To understand the origin of a piece of data is going to require some kind of, this is a very overused, beaten term, but social consensus. Basically, you can't algorithmically figure out where data came from. It has a human source. So the important thing is to create, I would say, like trust infrastructure, being able to validate attestations that have been made about data from trusted sources. And so, in theory, right, this is relatively straightforward because you can look at the internet for a good example of how this can work. By looking at DNS signers and certificate authorities. If you have trusted certificates that data providers are using to sign, saying, I own this data. So if it's a hospital health records, you're like, yes, this is my hospital. Or if it's tweets from a social media account. You can go, this is like, I used TLS Notary to validate that I log into my Twitter account, and here are my tweets. And the value of privacy technology and zero knowledge there is being able to propagate that attestation whilst performing transformations on the underlying data. So you can say not just that. So let's take, for example, AI-generated images, AI-generated videos. This is going to become increasingly more and more of a problem. We're already seeing scammers, like calling people up pretending to be their parents, their children, using AI voices. So if you could do something like take a picture where your camera signs a signature saying, okay, this picture is legit, it's from a real camera, and the hardware is relatively trusted, then you can use EK to modify that image. So you could have I don't know, like a front cover of Vogue magazine, where it's heavily, heavily modified and edited, but you can still prove, yeah, okay, this originally came from a real camera. This isn't manufactured out of whole cloth. And so I think that ability to perform data transformations on data that originally had some provenance attached to it is extremely valuable.
Yeah, on our side, we implement knowledge graphs as one way to provide the solution. So within PrivateAI, our biggest use case is from longevity space. Longevity, in other words, is life extension industry, which is currently one of the most kind of innovative parts of health tech. Many healthcare people actually dismiss it as sort of a like pseudoscience, which is definitely a wrong way to do it. So the current establishment of pharma and insurance companies definitely don't want that. But there is a critical mass of smart people, money, and ideas, similarly to crypto in that space. And one of the biggest questions there is always about data. And of course, if it's biomedical data, which is the case for longevity, then you have obviously privacy issue, which I'm sure we'll delve into later, but also the verifying that the data is legit and the source of the data. So on our side, we do work with trusted partners. It can be hospitals, it can be research institutes within larger universities, it could be biobanks or databases. So the source there is relatively trusted. However, what we need to provide to others is the ability to map all these different pieces of data where when you have meta research, if it has 10 different sources, you need to provide information what kind of data sets came from what sources. So we use knowledge graphs to do it because it permits you to both visualize the information you're getting and its respective sources, as well as to then get in touch with individual owners of the data and try and verify it locally, because the actual data itself does not need to travel in order to build the knowledge graph. So that's the way that PrivateAI solves this.
So I think of things like provenance and privacy and security as existing on a spectrum. So I'll focus on the provenance topic. So often it depends on what problem you're trying to solve. That will determine how strong of provenance you need. So for example, with GPT and these other foundation models, they were trained on, you could think of the content of the internet as like a big trash heap with lots of information in that heap. And those models don't care about the provenance of that data. They just want to see all the patterns. And all those random patterns, well, not random patterns, but all those human-generated patterns are what is extracted by those foundation models and extremely useful. Who cares about the provenance for the capabilities? I mean, those things brought us new capabilities, new tools. That being said, if you're doing something, let's say, working on like a medical LLM, well then, of course, you want the data to be clean and not just random opinions found on the internet. And so in that case, provenance matters. And in terms of what our particular project is doing, the graph, so the graph indexes blockchain data. And this is what I'm about to say is just, it's just been something I've been thinking about. We're not working on this. But I saw an EIP recently, or some sort of proposal recently, where basically you can embed metadata. This goes back to your answer about using the SSL certificates to authenticate the data. So basically, you could imagine someone in Web3 could build an indexing solution that focused on curating data in a more clean way, and basically scraping the internet and categorizing it more cleanly based on whatever provenance that could be obtained during the extraction process. And then, of course, I think crypto is perfect for this application, because then you have easy ways to then actually pay for that data. So you could imagine websites integrating the ability to request funds for the data. And then also after you've indexed the data, you could then have a way, of course, to sell that data, that clean data.
That's an interesting point actually about like how far do you take provenance, right? Do you sort of want to go back to the raw data that you're going to use for training? Do you want to maybe trust somebody who's actually going to do the training for you? Maybe do you want to trust like a web service that's like actually providing you inference and stuff like that? So what are your thoughts on like how far do you think the Web3 space should take provenance?
So first of all, like data lineage has always been a very valuable industry historically. You look at GitHub, for example. That's something, one of the prime examples of data lineage working really well for the tech industry. So to answer the second question, like how far should it go? It should go how far we can take it, right? And to answer the previous question, like how our particular platform can contribute to that, Bagel especially, we care about data provenance, but we don't do it ourselves. We work with our partners. We care about data privacy. That's all within our platform. And in terms of provenance, something we handle is the provenance of the models that are being developed on the system. And there are very interesting ways to do that, like where the model came from, if you're fine-tuning some model, which base model you started with. And without actually looking into the core of the model, you can do it in a really interesting way. You can look into the watermarking and fingerprinting of the models, something we developed internally within the research lab. So that's how we help in the provenance world, and which intersects with the AI world, is that you build some asset using the data. And what's the provenance of the asset? Like how it was built, what was used to do it. Right. Yeah, I'll let the rest of the folks chime in into the how far the provenance should go.
Well, sorry, my brain has died. What were your original questions?
So, as you mentioned, provenance pretty much exists on a spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So you can go all the way back to, let's say, going back to like raw data, maybe first-party signed data, training your model yourselves, doing all that verifiably, all of that. Maybe you can go back to OpenAI, maybe say, hey, you've done the job of actually training ChatGPT. Maybe I'll just use that as my source. You can maybe use any other web services that exist, or maybe agents that exist as the source of the provenance. So how far do you think, as a space, should we like take provenance? Like, should we? How far do you think we should go in terms of like establishing provenance for the data that we're using?
I don't really see it as a trade-off space. As in, there's no downside to going as far as we can. It's just about technological sophistication, in my opinion, and how much people are willing to pay for that degree of provenance. To give an example, like take Web 3 for example, Ethereum, Bitcoin. Let's take the Bitcoin ledger. Like that is the like an ultimate source of authoritative data provenance. You can look at a Bitcoin ledger and look at its transaction history going back all the way to 2008, and you can know that it's correct. That every single transaction that has been processed by that blockchain is valid. It was signed by the relevant private keys, et cetera, and you pay for that, right? In the form of these very expensive consensus algorithms. So I think, yes, some of the values of the technologies we're developing is that it makes the cost of high quality provenance lower, and we should go as far as we can.
Yeah, I think it really depends on what kind of application you have for this data, and therefore, if it's something as obvious as oracles showing you what the price of Ether was yesterday, it's pretty obvious. You just collect it from exchanges, a few of them, DeFi protocols, etc. So it's fairly obvious and straightforward. You don't need to go deeper than that. Then in some other cases, obviously, you do need to get deeper. But I can actually bring this question to the not actually even an absurd point that it's not only about where the data comes from, but also how it was collected or statistics. You can then question what the origin of data was like. Okay, actually, what is the statistical model?
That sort of stuff. Yeah.
Sorry.
Like who did the labeling, like all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, like, what's the statistical model? Because there is a saying, there is a truth, there is a lie, and there is statistics. Or as one German guy told me yesterday, he says, don't trust any statistics you haven't faked yourself. So we have so many problems at this whole kind of knowledge epistemological level with statistics that we need to talk about that first. Because in longevity space, I mean, I'll keep referring back to it because that's the primary use case for private AI. 4 years ago, I actually did a research for my, when I say research, obviously, like I hired a bunch of scientists to perform that. And I was curious, about whether I should be taking one particular medicine for life extension purposes. And their consensus was that 0 risk, some chance of reward. So it's like, okay, you should take that medicine because like no risk and maybe you live longer. And there was another medicine that back then they said, actually there is a risk of cancer and maybe it's gonna help you. Like, okay, I'm not gonna take that medicine. 4 years later, today, well, to be more precise, it was last August, actually it's 1 year ago already. But anyway, 1 year ago, I converged with the same scientists and see them present. The second medicine is like, okay, that's what you should take for life extension. And this other stuff, don't take it, it's dangerous, not great. So I'm like, dude, all of you, and it's not random scientists, it's Harvard people, Oxford people, all the best people. I'm like, how does it work? Well, yeah, I mean, the research was not comprehensive, statistical model was not great, or we didn't take the full distribution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's sometimes not, and the quality of data was amazing. Harvard labs verified, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, if you want to go back to the biomedical data, for instance, or any other kind of data where it's super important to know the origin, you should also ask yourself, what were the assumptions made, how was it tested, and ask a bunch of statistical questions.
So I guess kind of related. So I think again it depends on the application, and also like imagine if a new AI model came out that solves some sort of cancer, provably. Would you care where the data came from that it was trained on, if it was always able to, like, let's say, do like gene therapy and 100% of the time solve the cancer? I don't care where they got the data. I don't care about the provenance of the data. Does it work? Does the thing do what it says it's going to do reliably? That's all I care about. So I think that's one perspective I have. Maybe if we think about, let's say, agents, like on-chain agents that are going to be making actions based on the state of the chain, well, I want to know that the agent needs to know 100% that the inputs that it's using for decision making are authentic. So in that case, it has to have like complete, like cryptographic, like verifiability, or maybe economic security that data has good provenance.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, I guess let's touch a bit upon the other aspect, which is like the privacy of the data that's actually going into our AI models and like inference processes today, right? So how important do you think privacy is for the AI space as a whole? And how do you think Web3 can like help make that better for the AI space as a whole?
So I think all of us know here that earlier this year, Anthropic, the creators of Claude, had a data leak, which basically leaked the customer information, like all the account information. A lot of customers also got their financial information revealed, which is a catastrophic event if it happens at that scale from that kind of organization. And these kind of things will continue happening if we do not prioritize one thing, and that is privacy. So privacy is super important. And this is not just like some small number of people that shared this opinion. Like there has been research that has been done. Like more than 57% of the AI consumers believe that AI poses a massive privacy risk to their personal information. So we won't be able to scale the industry without privacy. That's just not possible. And how Web3 can help. Actually, I think Web3 decentralization to some extent increases the risk of privacy because there are like different parties in different parts of the world and they're handling each other's information, and that's a risk to privacy. But does that mean we shouldn't do it? No, we should do it. Like decentralization is important, but we should take the privacy first approach. A lot of projects are working in decentralizing AI without the privacy, and we believe that's not the way to do it. You should think about privacy first, then how to scale that from there. And yeah, Web3 can help to some extent in the incentivization layer as well. Like you can incentivize high quality information, data, models with privacy. That's one way Web3 can handle it. And also the coordination part too. Like that's the superpower of Web3.
I can give it a go. So, how important is privacy with AI? Say what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, because I work in Web3. I don't really work directly in AI. It's very easy to conflate the world we think should exist and the world that is going to exist. As in, okay, take things like DALL-E, Midjourney, right? Like AI image generation, absolutely amazing stuff these days. If you look at AI music generation, advancements, whilst there's been advancements, it's not been so great. Why is that? It's because music is copyrighted, and there are lobbies that are strong enough to force AI companies to be restricted with the data they train on. Whereas images may be copyrighted, but there is no agency or entity that has the clout to restrict AI companies' behavior. So we don't want user data. Like, none of us as users want our data to be leaked. We don't want our data to be manipulated or analyzed without our consent. But it's going to happen because there's nothing that's going to stop it from happening. Even if you add advanced privacy technologies into the mix, it increases the inertia and difficulty of using these these tools. And so any organization, AI company that can get away with training without these tools will gain a commercial advantage. So I don't want to be a complete doomer about it. I think that privacy technology does enable alternatives, right? Like, so everyone's excited. Well, a lot of people are excited about the possibilities of AI. And if the argument is, look, we have to sacrifice data privacy to get these benefits, that's very different to saying, look, it makes my life a lot easier if we sacrifice data privacy. Like me as an AI company. So it does give more bargaining power to lobby groups who care about these kinds of protections. But I think from the user perspective, privacy, whilst it's important, I just don't think the incentives are aligned. Where privacy and ZK and AI really mix in a commercial way, which is why I think organizations are getting funded, it's because of institutions don't want to trade data amongst each other, whereas they may benefit collaboratively from training AI models on their combined data. So, medtech is a quintessential example of this.
Yeah, I think we are kind of sleeping on all these scandals that we were talking about 5, 6, 7 years ago with NSA, Cambridge Analytica, et cetera, back when the capabilities of AI were much lower and therefore the impact on our lives was much lower with those problems. And people back then were already talking about how the big tech knows more about ourselves than we do. They know better than we do what we're going to do tomorrow. Uber would definitely know better where you're going to go 3 days later than you might be aware of yourself. Google might know better what you're going to search for. Amazon will know better what you want to buy next month before you even think of it. That was pre-AI kind of like capabilities of today. So we should be a lot more concerned about this. I think people are kind of like in this honeymoon phase with all the AI tech. But actually, unfortunately, in my opinion, I mean, we can definitely fight back. But the fight is like kind of lost, in my opinion, at the macro scale. You now have Windows has all AI capabilities by default, so does Mac. You can obviously use Linux, but most people can't use it, and even those who can, they sometimes won't have the convenience of some basic software. So that's the problem. So the way you think, the way you create all your alpha, it can be learned by this system. So I'm not very optimistic about this. But at the same time, I still think it's a fight worth fighting. To quote Captain Reynolds from Serenity, from Firefly, he said that may have been on the losing side, still not convinced it was the right one, it was the wrong one. So I think it's a hard fight, and especially we can observe crypto. I joined crypto primarily for this, self-sovereignty and privacy of your finance. I mean, obviously the first value is self-sovereign ownership, but second fact is that BTC also offered this pseudonymous framework where you could just own assets quietly, so to say. And I think we have kind of lost all of that, not least because of the governments obviously fighting that hugely. They hate privacy aspect of crypto even more than the self-sovereignty of Bitcoin. But most of the industry leaders, they kind of gave up on that fight, and many projects just like don't care about it at all. That's the big problem. So I think we should, try and at least ask ourselves the questions about the data privacy in the age of AI, where you can do so much more with it, and therefore we should still try and come up with solutions. But I guess one thing we should think about is most people don't really care about privacy, and they also want convenience. To put it into perspective, in my company, in one of my earlier startups, I tried to make corporate-wide usage of Proton Mail because, like, hey guys, stop using Gmail. They're sucking all your data, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I used it for a few months, and I said, shh, I'm not gonna use it.
Do they have like a corporate version?
Sorry?
Do they have like a specific corporate version?
Yeah, they do. They do. But it's as bad as the public one. So I tried to, and I mean, I like what the guys are doing, but you couldn't search your mail for keywords. I'm like, why can't you all? Because we cannot put the crawler inside. That's what protects your privacy. So yeah, great. But then if I cannot search my email, then it's unusable. So there's always this trade-off between privacy and usability. And we have to always, when we build privacy, you have to like always think, can we make it usable? Because if you have a super safe safe box where you can have the biggest treasure in your life, but you cannot even open it yourself, then like, okay, what is the point? You can just dump it at the bottom of the ocean. It'll be as safe there as well.
Privacy, security, they all come with a cost. I think, 10x, 100x, 1000x more than not having privacy because of the technology involved to give the privacy in addition to the user experience. So I think in Web3, I mean, we haven't even found, there's not product market fit, in my opinion, with Web3 and AI yet. So let's find product market fit first. I personally don't think that by adding 100x costs to ourselves to give privacy, when we know users don't even care about privacy, if you're using Facebook, Twitter, whatever, you don't care about privacy. So let's find product market fit first and then deal with privacy. I think that'll come in when AI starts being involved with financial transactions, and we're not there yet. LLMs, I would not give LLMs control over my keys, so they're not doing transactions, and they won't anytime very soon, I don't think. At least I wouldn't use them anytime soon. Once they start being used, then yeah, you don't want your transactions being front-run because your transactions are being sent in a clear to some like decentralized network. Then privacy will start mattering when there's money involved.
All right, I suppose we are at the end of our time. Really interesting conversation with you guys, and yeah, give it up for our panelists.